right. Hello. Good afternoon. Yes, I guess it is indeed the afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're in the eastern coast of the United States, I suppose it is good afternoon. If you're west, it's only noon or in the morning, but I'm shan't to go through all the time zones today. Thanks for joining if you are in here. I appreciate it, as always. Here to do the OSR Reddit Roundup a day early because I will be traveling not very far, but to Philly for PAX Unplugged. I'm not sure when I'm going to be leaving and what I'm going to be doing and when I'm going to get set up and what my internet's going to be like, blah, blah, blah. So rather than take a chance that I won't be in a position to stream tomorrow, I figured I would do the weekly roundup today. Hey, Terrence. Thanks for hanging out. So let's get right to it. Give this a good old refresh, see the latest and greatest, using the hot tab as usual. And let's see what we get. Has anyone modded the OSE demi-human races into human classes? I don't think I need to go check that out, but this was posted. The question was posted by Burrito D20, and the answer is yes, I did. I didn't even mod them. I just threw them in my game. I think what I told my players was that these were essentially different heritages. So if you think of my inspiration for that was, well, one, I wanted an all-human game just from the aspect of going for a more classic sword and sorcery vibe. So I wanted to have humans, and then the others could really be weird and strange, and it could be. I think there's a lot of interesting ground to cover there. I don't always like. Oftentimes I'll refer to it. I think other people will as well, as sort of the Mos Eisley Cantina effect, where it's just everybody's hanging around all these different creatures, and it's just this kind of motley menagerie of folks. That's fun for some things, but other times I think it is interesting to look at somewhat closer to maybe what our real experiences would be if we were thrown into one of these worlds, which I think is captured in the classic sword and sorcery stories of a person more or less like us. Granted, someone like Conan isn't exactly like us, but in terms of the things that they experience in their adventure stories, it's very much like someone who, granted, is from sort of a mythological fantasy realm, but then when they experience these really otherworldly things, it is as otherworldly to them as it would be to us. And I really like that. And I think it allows you to maybe delve into the strange stuff a lot more. If you want to have some really, really interesting takes on, say, elves, if you have a player that's an elf, one, you have to fill them in on everything. You guys are going to share the same vision, and it kind of, to me, it can sometimes lessen that effect if that's the effect you're going for. But in my game, I had said, hey, I want to do an all-human game, but if you want to play, if you're looking at and say, oh, my roles or whatever, I would really love to play a dwarf or an elf or something like that. I would say, you can play with one of those heritages that sometime in the past, whatever, you happen to have this little strand of Fey heritage that gives you you have these kind of abilities that we would consider in the classic game just elf, but in point of fact, you're a human. You just happen to have this different, in a way, a different template. It's just a different cultural stereotype, cultural archetype that you're playing. And I don't think you have to really do much. I didn't mod it. I would just say, okay, here's your new XP charts. Here's your abilities. You're playing an elf or a dwarf, there it is. Just play it. Hey, Don. What's up? What's for lunch? For lunch, I dine on OSR tonight. Or I suppose today. Okay. Running the game. Where are my glasses? Here are my glasses. Oh, people do things. I don't know if they chose this or just Reddit did it, but you know what? When you're just running with a thin text like that, putting black on red, not really the best for readability, Reddit. I don't know if the OSR moderators picked that or you did, but especially with someone like me whose eyes aren't the best anymore, that's a recipe for trouble. Oh, but here I am curious about this one. Let me give it an upvote. Submitted by Horoscope Zine. Rulings on RPG. Flame emoji. Simple combat. Oh, and there's nothing. Is there something there? Oh, here we go. Oh, it's a video. All right. I can't If anyone wants to see the video, they can check this out. I guess it was inspired by a Pitts Perilous post. Hopefully all my plosives aren't exploding from that. Pitts Perilous. All right, it's a video. Unfortunately, I like the picture with the, looks like an older school kind of pewter miniature, or is it just, I don't know. All right, I gave it an upvote, but nothing for me to do. Here's another question. Boy, Burrito D20 coming in hot with a bunch of questions. All right, I'll upvote his other question that I answered. Well, let's see this one. Fixed damage dice based on HD. Another question by Burrito D20. They ask, I like the simplicity of fixed damage dice, D6 by OSR rules, but this seems pretty crummy for the fighter swinging his longsword versus the wizard throwing daggers from the back line, especially at lower levels where their THAC0 is the same as every other class also. What are people's thoughts on using the dice used for each class's HD as that class's damage dice? So a fighter gets a D8, clerics and elves a D6, etc. This maybe shorts the thief a little, but maybe their ability to use magical swords helps make up for this. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's fine. I think a lot of people have come up with different things. One, we have to remember that part of the, and yes, the thief does dilute this, which I read somewhere or somebody mentioned it, which is interesting, right? The magic sword thing used to be kind of just the fighters thing. Then the thieves got it, kind of dilutes a bit of that specialness. I would be totally fine with saying that your class's hit die or your whatever you're using to roll for your hit points would be the same thing as your weapon damage. It kind of makes sense. You can definitely see it if you look at your hit dice as a function of your ruggedness and endurance and maybe your will and power and kind of the mythological sense of power, then sure. That could totally do the trick. Brian Smith says, hit die as damage die sounds good. I'm always a fan of die size over modifier number. Yeah, I mean, they both, so I'm kind of torn, right? And actually, I was just in the OSR Discord. Somebody brought up Shadows of the Demon Lord, which I appreciate. I like as a system. But Shadows of the Demon Lord has this kind of boons and banes modifier system where you add some dice as a positive modifier, which they call a boon, but then you roll more dice if you have a bane, would be kind of like a disadvantage or a penalty, and then you pick the tops, the best of each one and roll it, and it's kind of, it can add more excitement, but there's also more, someone's like, oh, I really like that, and I like that stuff over static bonuses. It's more exciting, but at the same time, the nice thing with a static bonus is that it's static. You know you got it. If I am D6 plus 2, I know the minimum I'm getting is 3. All right, I'm getting that plus 2 no matter what. If it's D6 plus D4, sure, every once in a while I might get that 4. I'm also going to get 1 sometimes. And I don't know that I always prefer one to the other as a player. Sometimes I just want that. Give me that consistent, that, if you had a, for example, in this case, right? Okay, we could say a fighter gets a D8. In some cases I almost want that. Give me the D4. Yeah, less chance to hit a D8, but I'll take that. I'll take that standard, 4 points over or whatever it would be, right? But I guess ultimately not to confuse things with getting overs. I know the different philosophies of whether you want the more swinginess or whether you want the consistent middle of die rolls, but I guess I would just ultimately say that sometimes the bonuses, just having the flat bonus, are nice. I think fighters, if there's a struggle for fighters or fighter players, it's that their whole class is basically built up of just getting a couple of static bonuses. And would it be more exciting to give them something else, like in this case, a higher die? And if you have thieves at D4s, does that detract from them? I don't think so, because they're thieves. They're not meant to be going toe-to-toe in combat anyway. They should be angling, if they can, depending on your rule system, for a backstab, or really they should be in the back lines throwing darts or using their bows or something like that. And of course, magic users as well. Ryan Smith says, proficiency die rather than a static number seems more fun to me, for example. Yeah, I go both ways. I think rolling more dice is fun, and it's certainly not bad. I think sometimes having that static bonus is also nice. I think maybe I would say, can I get a combination of both? And you could say, oh, you already have that. You have high strength, you're getting a strength bonus to your melee weapon attack damage. So you've already got that in there, and then you get this other die rolling on top of it. Lincoln says, dice by HD and dice by weapon achieve the same effect with typically the same results. Well, the difference being is that whether you want, so the difference between hit dice by HD and dice by weapon is that dice by weapon means that anybody can pick up that two-handed sword and be rolling the same damage. Whereas what I like about this, and I think what other people like, is that you're rewarding the classes. You're saying if you're a fighter and you have a two-handed sword, you're just better at it than if I hand it to the wizard. And that's reflected not only in your ability to hit, but your ability to hit well, right? So that, yeah, you can hand that wizard two-handed sword, but they're doing D4 with it. And, whatever, plus whatever you're adding in for being a two-handed weapon. But essentially, they're just not efficient with it. If they could use it, obviously, I think we're going with they could. I mean, though I think with this kind of system, if I'm going to say wizards, all this things is based on a class, I might take away most of the weapon restrictions because it doesn't matter. Let the wizard have that giant halberd or that two-handed greatsword. They're only doing D4 damage with it. So if they want to do it, let them have it. So it's kind of a difference of your approach. Do you want it based on the weapon or do you want it based on the class? I kind of like, if I was going to do it, if I was going to pick one, I kind of like by the class a little bit better. It allows you to have that creativity as a player. If you want to be, and one of those things you see come up in 5th edition, I want to be a whip master and, whips stink. Well, in an old school game like this, whip is as good as a sword. And so if you want to be a whip guy, you can do it and you can be effective. And I don't have a huge problem with that. I mean, usually I come out and say the 5th edition sense of, hey, guess what? Whips are just not as efficient a weapon as an axe. That's just the nature of it. So you go into it with your eyes open saying, I want to be a whip guy. Well, you're going to have to work a little harder with the whip. But at the same time, with the simplification saying, hey, whatever weapon you use works, I'm okay with that too. Lincoln says, personally, I like having some reason to use a two-handed weapon instead of a shield. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you add some kind of modifier for things like that. Or I do like that. I like those give and takes between, hey, am I going to use a shield and a weapon and go kind of defensive? Am I going to go two-handed weapon and go offensive that way? Am I going to go weapon in each hand and go offensive that way? I do like that I do like that those choices exist and that they have some kind of effect on, or that choices matter. I like that if those choices exist, that the choices between them have some importance. Now, nothing says increase or decreasing dice works best when you're only going to have a few bonuses or penalties. I use dice size for initiative, but not attack damage. That's a good point. I think you could have multiple increases or decreases, though. And actually, I was just thinking about something else. But essentially, you could have, let's say, fighters. You're at you start with D8, but if you specialize, you go up to D10. And if you get something else, you go up to D12, right? And then on the flip side of, you could go the opposite way. Oh, you're using, so for example, you thief. You're using that two-handed weapon? Okay, that's fine. Oh, thief, you want to use this hill giant drop their club and you want to use it? Well, that's going to bring you down a die size because this weapon's too big for you. Guess what? You're ineffective. You've gone from D4 to 0, so you can't really lift it and use it effectively. So you can have those kind of gradations in there with die sizes if you don't mind having that kind of that usage die type bouncing up and down of die effects. Brian Smith mentions a Vorpal Whip. Oh, Terrence bringing out one of my old favorites, Flying Guillotine Master. Yes, give me some flying guillotines. How have they not? I've not seen someone try to write up the flying guillotine. I don't know how it would work because in the movies, well, depending on which one of those movies you've seen, in one of them, they just hand them out to a bunch of soldiers. So they weren't a special weapon. Anybody could have a flying guillotine, which might be overpowered since if you go by it's practically a one-hit kill. The guillotine lands over your head, then you pull the blades and then you just pull the head off. And then in that other movie, what is it? Flying Guillotine versus the one-armed boxer, something like that, or one-armed swordsman. I can't remember. In that one, there's just one guy that has the flying guillotine, which I think I like better because then you could kind of make it into more of a magic mystic thing that very few people know how to use. But yeah, I'm all about flying guillotines. Ryan Smith says, speaking of shields, how do you prefer to have them work? Damage soak, increase in AC, have them break. I like I usually just go increase in AC and also give that breaking ability. I know that I've read reports. It has not happened to me personally, but I've read reports of people abusing the sword breaking. Maybe they'll have their torchbearer carry 800 shields, or they'll have 800 shields, or they'll find 800 shields lying around. So they'll continually get that, be able to use that. Shields may be sundered. Hasn't been a problem in my games. Could be a problem. You could probably limit it in some way, but I think it's a neat. I like the idea of being able to sacrifice your armor as some kind of last ditch effort to get you out of dying. It certainly is a way if you want a different way of dealing with death and dying in games like OSE or BX, where maybe you don't want to go into negative hit points. You want to keep that, hey, 0, you die, but then you have these things where you could say, hey, you can give up a piece of your armor. Maybe you could say, okay, I'm plate mail. You can sacrifice part of it. Shields, you can sacrifice part of it. Helmets, maybe you could sacrifice for part of it. I kind of like that stuff. So I do like that idea of the shields, and it fits the kind of tropes of having a shield and one big thwack and it breaks the shield kind of thing. So I dig that. But the damage soak would work too. I think if I was going to do anything, I mean, kind of on my heartbreaker that I work on now and again, I've been sort of moving towards ace damage or armor as damage reduction. So that's probably where I would stick shields now. But if I'm just playing regular kind of gaming, I have no issue with shields being some kind of bonus to AC. Thieves should be able to wield thieves' tools two-handed. Oh, yeah. And then Brian Smith, I think, going back to the flying guillotine, got to kill the master to gain the weapon. Yeah, that's how I like it. Not, all the troops have one. All right, let's back out of this. I did give it a upvote. Okay, we got some reviews. Here's one. This one's going to take us to a blog. Let me do this. I think this should work. Yeah, I think that works. All right, I'll give it an upvote. Go to the comment, but let's go to the blog. Okay, so this is, I don't know what this is. We're going to read this and find out. Doesn't look like it's super long. I will put a link in the chat. So if you want to follow along, this is called the Council Crawl, which is intriguing. Ryan Smith says the map is pretty. Yep, the map does look pretty. If you're listening to this later on podcast form, apologies. It is a very pretty map. I think it's from. This might be from. Was it? I want to say this is familiar to me somehow, but can't quite place it. Okay. Posted this week from Tuesday, December 7, 2021, called the Council Crawl. This is on the Whose Measure blog. Yielding uncertainty and unyielding bronze. I guess maybe this is by someone named Phlox. Kind of. Yes, this is posted by Phlox. All right, let's read what Phlox has to say. In college, I would attend these murder mystery parties, day-long affairs where everyone's playing a character trying to solve a murder, but actually mostly to pursue whatever 2 to 4 objectives have been assigned to them by browbeating other guests. Basically a LARP, but you have a rambling half-page character sheet about how you're Bast impersonating Anubis, and you have a piece of paper that says gun on it. Since then, I played in this crazy birthright game in which every PC was the ruler of a different country, could barely talk to each other outside of short, public messages until a grand council every 5 years let us actually speak in private for 5 Halen damn minutes. At this sword and crown, quote-unquote, event, there were players in every room of the real-life house trying to make the most of this rare opportunity to make some sausage with the other rulers. My current play-by-post game, 10-Blade Demigod, is not quite as restrictive, but every council of rulers has set the game flying in a different direction. And this, maybe it's their map, or I don't know where this comes from. It says the map of Anuire. I thought maybe it was Birthright, but now I don't know. I used to have Birthright ages ago. I've actually been trying to re-get Birthright, but I don't remember the geography. So someone can fill me in if this is indeed Birthright or if this is else. I ruled Endir. Okay, so this is their map. They ruled one of these kingdoms named Endir, which is somewhere that I can't quite place yet. In any case, on a more sane scale, I recently got the chance to run 2 Vampire the Masquerade scenarios that start with a dinner party. I assume the prevalence of vampire parties in that game owe much to the LARP influence in that scene. The first, Baptism by Fire, is meant to be an introduction to the setting through a very underwhelming social engagement. The second, Annabelle's Party, sets up an investigation that spirals out into the politics of vampiric Chicago. Notwithstanding some good advice on how to run parties, I wonder if the potential of councils is not overlooked. It makes sense that in the OSR scene is primarily made up of dungeon crawling, hex crawling, and marginal domain play, but the concept of a primarily social game is often brought up in the absence of a procedure or game loop, and I think a council crawl provides one such framework. Okay, so now we're kind of getting to it. Brian Smith says, this post is written in a language I am not proficient in, apparently. We're getting to it. Consider that the preface. So the idea here, if I'm reading this correctly, is a game loop or mechanics for running social games or social encounters or social sequences, much in the same way dungeon crawls for dungeons, hex crawls for overland travel. Now we're thinking of, okay, council crawls for meetings and social occasions. A council crawl will need to be structured to be useful with a normal number of players and a single DM. Huge 20-person affairs have amazing energy, but will rarely be feasible as, say, a weekly game. How much of a council crawl campaign will be made up of these parties? Some people run dungeon crawl campaigns that are all dungeon delving, but most also include time spent in the wilderness or negotiating with people in town or briefly hex crawling. Hex crawl central campaigns usually have some dungeon delving elements. A council crawl campaign could feature councils as the main events, like the dungeons of a dungeon crawl or the hexes of a hex crawl. It could also feature councils as the connective tissue, like the dungeon of a hex crawl or the hexes of a dungeon crawl. Whew. All right. Let's see. Brian Smith says, past the preamble now, I see some bold text, so I'm saved. Yes, we do have some bold text. We do have some breaking out of stuff. Okay. Evil Table says, hey, I came up with a Hex Crawl procedure a while back and curious if I had thoughts about it. Well, shoot the link into the chat if you have something linkable, and we can read it after this. So happy to take a look, give some thoughts, and we can get some thoughts from the rest of the community here. But let me get through this first. But yeah, throw in the chat if you want to, or if it's something that you don't want to share out right now, or it's not finished, or however it is, you can find me and shoot it to me elsewhere. But if you have something shareable in the moment, feel free to drop in the chat and we'll check it out. All right, so it seems like we got two things now. A central council crawl. Imagine a campaign in which the party prepares carefully for a regular meeting of the Conan-esque city's leadership. It is at these meetings that the fortunes of the party is made or lost, where attendees are sometimes found slain by unknown hands, where the peril and adventure is. Between the councils, there is a quick set of mechanics to see how the political decisions of the previous council plays out, and to give the principal actors time to kidnap each other's nibblings and make other preparations. Nibblings, or is that meant to be siblings? I kind of like a nibbling. I got more from Brian Smith. Okay, Brian Smith says, I'm definitely sending something of my own design. Not sure what, but would love to bring something for show and tell. Absolutely. I would love to do a show and tell episode. Let's see. Evil Tables had posted the link above, but it's not sure it's showing. It doesn't look like it's showing. Somebody tell me if it's showing in something like YouTube. It's not showing in my chat window, Evil Tables. If it's showing somewhere else, another place you could drop it. I think so. If I'm reading this correctly, you are on YouTube. If the chat, it's not showing up, you can maybe put it as a comment in the video, and then maybe it will show. Maybe Brian or somebody else who's active in there. Maybe you can work with Evil Tables to get that link, or you can put it in the community, or you can at me at @HexPressman at Twitter. Send it to me that way, and I'll check in a minute. So, okay, so back to the nibblings. That's the central council crawl. A connective council crawl. Imagine a campaign in which the party needed to attend a freewheeling negotiation with a handful of interested parties in order to prepare for their dungeoneering expedition. securing funding, and deciding who best to serve. Each council would have many influences on the delve itself, but it would also have its own self-contained arc in which enemies are made and thwarted, secrets are revealed, and plots are advanced. The council serves the dungeon loop and is not where most of the experience is gained. There are other ways to do this. It's important to remember how rare it is for a long-term formed campaign to fit entirely into one play procedure, and there's no set point for how the procedures should interact with each other. The council crawl, like other game procedures, places certain limitations on the game. It must be somehow taken for granted that principal agents, PCs, will be meeting under a flag of nominal peace with serious goals. The threat of violence needs to be a big deal in these conditions, and if someone is murdered, that could be enough to take their proven killer out of play. Because we're designing these councils for play around a table, they cannot be designed exactly like a 20-person LARP. The PCs should be able to stay together most of the time, all of them participating in discussions. Conversations they are part of should involve them, not sideline them, and will ideally include a small number of important NPCs at a time to keep the conversation manageable. So I kind of like what's going on here. It's a lot of text, and maybe it's just because I don't know if I'm just stumbling a little bit with the reading, or just the way it's written. Not that it's written badly, but just it's not for reading out loud. It's not as smooth as maybe it could be, but he's setting the groundwork. He's setting up, in a sense, his design goals, or their design goals for what we're doing, which I appreciate. So we can kind of look back and should be able to see if this is working or not, or what it's trying to do. This can go too far. The Vampire the Masquerade module, Baptism by Fire, states that it is a module about a New Year's Eve party, but as far as I can tell, there's almost no interaction between the NPCs at all. One vampire will sit in front of an empty fireplace all night and speak as little as possible, up to and including using his magic vampire powers to make the PCs go away. Another is so shy as to make interaction nearly impossible unless the DM bends the rules a bit. A third one doesn't talk. As written, none of these people can even be found in the same room. There's about 6 vampires at this party, 0 human guests, and a staff that has been magically rendered unable to hold a conversation. If it's a party, it should feel like a party, is what I'm saying. NPCs should be talking to each other. There should be music and food, and occasionally 2 people can get serious looks and say, let's discuss this somewhere private, so a PC can eavesdrop by glass to the door. Because so many examples of this genre are serious and political and Machiavellian cavalcades, there has sometimes been a desire to make the NPC so convoluted and tight-lipped that only cunning and perceptive players will ever figure out what they're about. This is the opposite of ideal. If any kind of game should be playable with a glass of wine in your hand and 2 in your belly, it should be the dinner party game. NPCs can and should have hidden motives and emotional depths, but they should be signposted like a Bastion Land trap, or simple enough that a DM finds it easy to run 10 such characters. Something like Rogue Vampire seems to know almost nothing about vampire society, is actually a vampire hunter in disguise, is complicated enough. The political action of the game should be freewheeling, with revelations leading to dramatic confrontations and hasty blackmail and exile. There should always be time pressure. Oh, let's see. Nothing says, seems like such a simple idea explained in the most verbose way possible. It is a bit verbose. Maybe I'll kind of breeze a little bit, because it didn't seem like it was too long, but it's very dense. Council designers should resist the temptation to base all NPCs' motivations on cold realpolitik. The emotional throes of lovers, family members, and betrayed students are important for keeping things moving and establishing solid stakes. Every council needs its central problem. All right, so a central problem can be, so I'm going to skip a little bit here, trying to just get the main points. Hopefully I'll get them all. So a council needs a central problem. A central problem can be subtle. This is actually the great achievement of Baptism by Fire. Despite failing to really feel like a party as written, the central problem is the presumption that the PCs and their players are new to the concept of vampire society. Every NPC exists to introduce the PCs and players to an important facet of the game, and many of those NPCs get quickly interested in how the PCs adapt to vampire society. Okay, so let's get down here. Therefore, an outline for preparing councils and a procedure for running them. Hey, all right, I think we're getting down to the meat. Brian Smith says, just notice this post has a title and subtitle. Yeah, he's not fooling around, or they, whoever, Flocks. Whoever flocks is they are not fooling around. This is serious business. To prepare the council, the DM needs to consider the council's premise, its central problem, its major NPCs, and its itinerary. It's hard to define the exact order in which these should occur, because over the course of the campaign, some of these may be established first. All right, but okay, we're gonna get there. So let's just get down the premise. I'm gonna try to use these bolds as signposts here. This is the in-universe intention for the council. So I think that's fairly simple to grok. The central problem is the DM's reason for the council. This would be, to use their example, if the premise of that module was, hey, we're going to have a party for New Year's Eve, that's the premise, New Year's Eve party. The central problem of that module is introducing the PCs to the mechanics and the kind of vampire world, if we're using that baptism by fire example. I'm not sure that you need a central problem. I feel like in the kind of domain sort of play that I would have, I would just have that there are councils that happen every so often. I think they mentioned in that Birthright game, every 4 years there's a great council. The great council happens whether there's some meta problem for the DM or not. I presume it happens. But I suppose if you wanted to have something, if you're building it like an adventure kind of thing, and you wanted to have it, it's kind of maybe look at this thing and go, what is the place of this? If this is going to be a possibility, and kind of what is it doing for you? Let's say if you're drawing up an adventure, right? What is the purpose of this element? The major NPCs are the important people who will help to create and act out the drama of the council. The itinerary is a DM's tool, not an in-universe plan for the council. To keep things running and apply time pressure, set events should happen throughout the council that will change the way the characters act. Let's see. 4 or 5 events is plenty for a council that lasts a session. These could be major events that bring everyone together, like the discovery of a murder, or small scenes that bring characters aside, like a major NPC's attempt to seduce one of the PCs. It's essentially on a meta level, right? Do we want this just be people talking to each other forever? Probably not. So we need to have things to move it along. You could just have a simple time pressure, kind of like combat rounds or exploration rounds. You might have social rounds, and as after so many, there goes your day of the council. If you don't want it to bring in something, I don't know, artificial, like, oh my gosh, the body's discovered, or oh my gosh, the king's been poisoned, or whatever. And I could see simply saying, okay, you've got 3 rounds until lunch, and then lunch, some people might come, some people might leave, news will start to break, and people have a chance to talk, and then you'll have 3 rounds until dinner, and then after dinner you're done. And this is just a single day meeting. So if you don't have your stuff done by dinner, essentially 6 rounds, and there might be some things that happen, consequences from the morning. We'll have a chance to have a chance to settle over that lunchtime period. When they come back in the afternoon, things might alter. Then you're done. So maybe we could say, well, we could forego having some of these more plot-esque events. We want to break away and say, okay, we don't want to do the narrative thing, but we want to keep that time pressure, just saying, hey, there are 8 people here. Each one takes a certain amount of this time. So essentially of your social rounds, you have 6 social rounds, but you have 8 people you want to talk to. And knowing that stuff may change between the morning period and the afternoon period, choose. And you could even have kind of an initiative there too. You could really do some kind of combat-esque things, like here, roll your initiative, and then in initiative order, people get to choose who they want to talk to, which could be interesting as well. Evil Table said, send it through a mention on Twitter. All right, let me get through this, and then I'll hop over to Twitter and see where it's at, and then we'll grab it. From these elements, the procedure of play starts to form. Unlike certain RPG procedures, those of a council should be freewheeling, fast, and light. The loop is something like the DM describes the state of the council. Players gather information through conversation investigation. Players or itinerary change the state of the council. Repeat step 1. Yep. Most of these changes will not require much rolling of dice. Perhaps information gathering requires some skill rolls to discover or understand the clues. Perhaps the state of the party is changed, say, by a combat that requires a concept of dice, but the conversations themselves should need little mechanization. This is all someone used to running games and playing characters should need. Players can detect when a social event is used to deliver exposition and tepid political dialogue. They can also smell out an opportunity to strike it rich in a single night. make the council rewarding and dangerous, and it can be electric. And we have, all right, we have the example. I will skip the example right now, but that's pretty cool. I maybe I would like a little more mechanics. I see fleshing this out. Maybe I'll have to do something because I think I could flesh that out. Having maybe a more, if you wanted to say more sandboxy interpretation of this, but I think there's some interesting ideas there. I like the idea of councils. I like the idea of having these set places where you can really exchange information once you reach certain levels of society. And if we're doing something where we're saying in our game that domain play is a goal that's out there, if we're saying that, I mean more as like it is a real goal. Like your goal as a player is to come in and get from pauper to prince or that. Then having these councils that you can get into at different levels, maybe in your starting village after you guys come in and you prove yourselves and you do stuff, then maybe you get invited to some meetings with the local lord or the sheriff or the reeve or both or whoever. And then you can add into that maybe a low level, go between levels 1 and 4. That could be something that's possible. Then you could use this kind of procedure for having these. When you get called to these seasonal, every winter, spring, summer, fall, they're going to have one of these. Go over stuff. You can be a part of those. And then as you move up the totem pole more, maybe you start to get your first land grant and you become a lord on your own, or you get attached to a more powerful household. Then maybe you get called into those small council meetings or whatever kind of thing. And then you can use this kind of thing. So I think that there are really intriguing things. I never played Vampire. I've read some of the books and stuff. I never played that. I never played any LARPs or murder mystery parties. So I come from it, a little bit of different space than this person. But as Nothing mentions, I really like the bones of this idea. Indeed. So I gave him an upvote. All right, let me go to Twitter. And let's see if we can grab. I got some notifications. Oh, I don't see any of the whoop. Here we go. All right, look at this first time. Evil Tables, you are the first. This is the first time I've done this. I don't know why I didn't think of this before. You were the first person, first community share on a roundup. All right, this is OSE Hex Crawl Procedure from Evil Tables. And I'll try to see. I don't know. I don't know if it's a Nightbot that is cutting out links being posted, or if it's a setting on my end. I'm sure it comes from a good place because I don't want someone coming in and spamming, crypto links all over the chat. Maybe I can figure out a way to. I wish it would come through as something that I could approve, because I at least maybe because I'm doing this, I'm not seeing the direct YouTube interface, but I'm on Restream, so I see the nice thing with Restream is theoretically I think everyone who comments in here is pretty much doing it through YouTube. But if people were commenting through Facebook, or I'm also on Twitter, this is also broadcast on Twitter, I think it should all show up in this one interface. But maybe the bad part of it is that I don't have any particular mod things enabled through here. So if it is waiting in the kind of, comments held for review, chat posts held for review with things like links in it, I don't see it. I might have to figure something else about that. But let's just, hey, we got it here. So we're here. Let's go. Okay, so this is from Evil Tables. Thanks, Evil Tables, for sharing this. Link is below. It's called Old School Essentials Hex Crawl Procedure. This is the Hex Crawl Procedure I use for Old School Essentials. It's heavily influenced by the Dolmen Wood Hex Crawl Procedure. I haven't read that, so I'm not up on that. I should probably get to that, as well as by the Necropraxis post on overloading the encounter die. My main design goals have been to develop something that generates interesting events for realistic travel while keeping a quick enough pace. Flexibility is key. Depending on what happens, some days will pass in just a few seconds. Other days will take up an hour or so of session time. And I appreciate that. I've tried to mention this on videos, but I think some people get tripped up when they think that they can and should be relating some measure of hex crawl movement with some fixed measure of playtime. And I think that just puts you in a bad spot. You can't know. It's kind of like a dungeon. depending on what's happening in the dungeon, how you're rolling random encounters, you can move thousands of feet and nothing's happening. Or you could move 10 feet and things are happening. And if you're moving a bunch of time and nothing's happening, time's going to go by faster. If you're hitting an encounter every 10 feet, in session time, playing time is going to be slower. But you can't really force it. Or, no, you can force it. It's just not a very good idea because nothing's going to seem less dynamic and less and more forced than something is just happening every time you take one step. Something's happening. I mean, I've seen that happen. I've been in games that's happened, and it just turns into a slog. So I appreciate up the front that the self-awareness of, hey, sometimes you're going to be able to get a lot of movement done in one session or in one part of one session, and sometimes it's going to be slow. And yeah, you just got to you got to roll with it. So when you're hex crawling, don't try to think about, oh, I have a session to fill, so let's hex crawl, because they might zip through an area way faster than you think, and then you're not prepped, or they might take way longer than you think. So you want to just keep in mind it's very much rubber band. It's very, very dynamic. Don't put an actual session number or playtime number, fixed number on there, because it won't work well. Hex Crawl Procedure. Oh wait, first, sorry, I skipped something. I generally have the players roll on the event table openly when they travel. This creates Oregon Trail-like feel where they are aware of the results and risks of different actions. Hex Crawl Procedure. Each adventuring day is divided into a day phase and a night phase with one action per phase. Weather is checked at the start of each day. If the party does not camp at night, they become exhausted. -1 to attack rolls, cannot prepare spells, surprised on 1 and 3, and must spend the next day resting. All right, I think that's fine. I almost think -1 to attack rolls. I might even go -2. But that's good. The one thing I've struggled with this myself, because I'm kind of been messing around with trying to make a standardized procedure, is the kind of forced march situation, because you can force march on multiple days, not maybe through the night and through the day. So I might think about if there would be a way to scale this a little bit, but as if I was just going with a fixed, hey, you're either exhausted or you're not, that works totally fine. And I do like the fact that your surprise goes up, or your chance of being surprised escalates, because you're exhausted, you're tired, you're not, your eyes aren't as sharp, your ears aren't as sensitive, you're just more likely to get surprised by something, or to miss something that you would have seen earlier. And here we have actions. Travel a day's distance modified by terrain and encumbrance. Lost chance 2 and 6 without roads, and 3 and 6 in difficult terrain. Explore the terrain for new features. 1d6 hidden features revealed on 3 to 6. Interact. Spend time at features already discovered. Refer to that location for events. Forage. Search for food and or hunt for animals. 1d6 food found on 4 to 6. Rest. Spend the day recovering. 1 HP recovered. Camp out for the night. I think these are all fine. It's funny because I do have some similar things in mind. Mine are a little bit more granular, but that's neither good nor bad. It's just, how granular do you want to be with your units of time and kind of what you could do. Explore, I like it. Just, hidden features on a 3 and 6 is good. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that, do you want to make it more? I guess it's kind of like about the exhausted, right? And it's not a good or bad thing. It's merely a matter of what your style is. If you feel like in your game you might have, or that you currently have, or you think you might want to have something like a ranger class, you might want to think about how these different, or a scout, how these different procedures are going to interact when you want to throw a character ability in the mix. So would you say, for example, if you had a scout, that they would get that the range, how you would write it up? Okay, hidden features are revealed on a 3 and 6. So if you have a scout, would you want to write up that it's a 2 to 6? Or how do you want to? So the only thing I would say is I might want for myself to try to, but it may not matter for you, see how, if I was going to build in a class ability that, or some kind of maybe I want to say in some terrains it's more difficult. Maybe I want to say in a swamp it's harder to explore and find features than in, say, grasslands, which is easy. So how would I compute that? So we have this fixed range, 50%, 3 to 6. If I wanted to say harder for a a swamp, do I just want to say bake it in as, okay, 4 to 6, or do I want to say the range decreases by 1? Like, how you want to play with those numbers. But it's good. Now, Nothing has a question. Do you heal HP for camping or only for resting during the day? And the answer from Evil Tables, this is great because we have the author right here. Only for resting during the day, not for camping. I would say, in my game, I've gotten to giving them both. It's just it's a flavor thing, right? But if you're going, to me, you get the one for doing overnight rest. And then if you want to spend a whole day doing nothing, I'll give you the extra one. That's just, but that's my home game. That's my home game right now. You'll get one overnight, another one if you spend the whole day resting. Because I think you are giving up a whole day, because I say you're basically doing nothing. You're really just hanging around the camp. But that's just a style thing of how you want your game to be. Evil Table says, yeah, it's a good point about adjusting exploration for different areas. I'll think about that. Yeah, you may want to look at, I don't know if it's in the expert set, certainly in the white box. Probably expert set too, because they have some of their things are based on which terrain you're in. So you may want to look at that, but you may not want to. I think for some games, does it matter? Right? You could say, okay, well, I'm just going to boil it down to a 3 and 6, 50% roll if you're out exploring. And I don't care whether you're in desert or mountains or swamps, or you could base it on your hex types. I'm doing more of a based on your hex type kind of thing, but that's, that's just me. Foraging is good. Like, the only thing I might say is, do we want to adjust that based on your terrain? Is food found on a 4 and 6? Does that work for deserts as well as grasslands? Or do we want to, and of course you can adjust it. It's more like, if I was going to write this out and then have modifiers for hex types, how do I want to prepare that? How do I want to present it, basically? Camp. Okay. Then we get random events. Oh, nice table. Roll once per action, referencing the table below. Hex Crawl random events. So it's a D12. This reminds me a bit of the One Ring. Kind of has that system of the different rolls, and then you roll for different happenings during the roll. So if you're traveling, you can get encounters, hazards, spore, uneventuals, or a location. Obviously, we'll see below what they are, but it seems fairly specific. Difficult, I'm guessing that's difficult terrain. You're going to get, again, some combination of hazards, encounters, but a much higher chance of hazards, and some of them are times 2, so 2 hazards. No uneventfuls under difficult terrain. Saying your road has a bunch of uneventfuls. Explore, mostly hazards and uneventfuls with a smaller chance of encounters and spore. Foraging, large chance of spore, which makes sense. And then a little bit. So you get just basically a different spread of these things depending on what we're doing. Obviously, if you're just hanging tight in camp, best chance of just being uneventful. I'd wonder about spore in that sense. If you're hanging out in camp, is this to be that you would, just because you're hanging around, you're more likely to spot spore because you're in the same place and potentially looking around more? Or is this everyone fell asleep, so the bear came by and pooped in the middle of camp and then walked away again, so you got spore? I might want to think about I don't know what it means yet. We'll see, but that maybe was my one question about it. If you're camping resting, you have a really high chance of getting spore compared to, say, travel. There's a higher chance of encountering spore while you're resting than you're traveling, which maybe is a bit interesting to me. And the only way you see more spores if you're foraging, but that one makes more sense. So I'm curious about that. So an encounter is an encounter with wandering monsters. A hazard is an unexpected hazard. You're going to roll a d12 and choose from either event or terrain. And I maybe if it's times 2, does that mean you'd get both? Is that what would we mean by times 2? So hazards can be, again, it's a d12. Could be an injury. Could be rations ill attended to. Gear misplaced. Animals exhausted. A broken cart or vehicle. Monster traps. Rock slide or mudslide. Insect or pests. Sprained ankle. Retainer exhausted. Heavy wind or fog. No suitable campsite. And then the terrain, up or downwards cliff. Ooh, enchanted or toxic air. Thick undergrowth. Poor ground for walking. Hazardous vegetation. Some kind of structure prevents passage. Path blocked by rubble. Water prevents passage. Path ends unexpectedly. Deep chasm, steep elevation, exposed outcropping. These are all good. The only things I might say here is path ends unexpectedly. What if you're not on a road? If you're not on a road and I get that terrain and the GM says to me, we've been bivouacking. Is that the right word I want? I don't know. We're hacking our way through the wilderness and a machete in hand, and I get this, okay, your path ends unexpectedly. I might go, but I'm not using a path. I'm navigating some other way. So who cares if the path ends unexpectedly? Otherwise, I think these are all nice. Some of these maybe, I don't know whether it's below or you might want to, so one of the things that with blog posts and things like that is bushwhacking, Bob Mossel. Thank you. I don't know why I said bivouacking. Yeah, bushwhacking is what I meant. Yep, exactly. So one of the things that's interesting when you're dealing with kind of blog posts is and I struggle with this, is do I look at it like someone's just giving me their house rules, or do I look at it like someone's putting us out there for kind of consumption? So on the sense of like, hey, here are my house rules that I'm using, it's perfectly fine. Of course, if I'm looking at it like, oh, if this were published in a book or in a blog or in something, or not, I had a blog or in a book or a zine or something of that nature, what do I think it needs, right? And so I look at these hazards. I think they're great. I would like to know a little bit more about what they mean. What does an injury cut mean to the travel? So what I would want to see in that sense, and sure, I can figure it out myself, but what does it mean? So when we say injury or cut, because on the one hand, as a player, and really as a GM too, we're getting cuts and things all the time, right? In combat, is that a hit point cut? Is it just a purely RP cut? Like, oh, you scratched your face, but it doesn't really mean anything. In the case of a hex crawl hazard, if it's a cut, it doesn't really spend any time. So as a hazard, what is it doing? I feel like for a hex crawl, the hazards should all be things that are going to slow you down, and we should maybe have a reference to what this does for your day of travel. Does it stop? Is it an injury that leads to your progress being stopped for the day? Or maybe your progress is slowed in half or a quarter, something like that. If your rations are ill attended to, what does that mean? You lose a day's worth of rations. Roll D4, and this is how many rations are spoiled or rotted or something else, right? And maybe give those kind of numbers for what you mean. Okay, gear misplaced. Well, what does that mean? Are we literally going to say, okay, take your inventory, how many things are in there, roll some, I have 50 things in my inventory, so we're going to roll a D50 and whatever you roll is lost. Like what do these mean in terms of travel? Because I think what we want out of the event type things are things that are going to, either we're going to stay at an abstract level, in which case we're going to say, okay, you're moving, but you didn't make as much progress through these hills because on day one there was a heavy wind and fog. On day 2, you guys were assaulted by insects, and so that slowed you down. So instead of taking 3 days like you estimated to get through the hills, it took you 5. That's one way we could do it. Or we're going to say, this thing has happened, now we're going to zoom in and role play it out, which we might do for a rock slide / mudslide, where I might want to zoom in and say, you can go around it, and that's going to eat you up an extra day, which could be here, or you could figure out some way to, how do you want to handle it? So I'd want to know a little bit more about how these things are affecting your hex crawl, because that's really what we're talking about. These are obstacles. What are the hex crawl costs for these obstacles? Same things for the terrain. What the heck, if we have a deep chasm, what does that mean in terms of the hex crawl? Does it mean it's cut? Does it mean it's going to go around? It's going to take up, like, what do you envision for how these things are affecting the hex crawl? If we're gonna stay zoomed out and just want to say, okay, 8 days of travel before because we didn't roll anything, nothing's going on, but here's kind of what happened. Here's where you are after 8 days, or we want to, zoom in. If I was writing this up for my home game, I would have it like this, because I would just come up with it on the spot. If I was writing it in terms of something kind of for pseudo sort of publishing, I would do it a different way. Or just I'd want to give those extra details for people to say, hey, this is what I mean. But they're all great. They all make total sense. And there's a lot of room to expand on them for different things if you want to. No, nothing says, I really like the hazards. I think most games need more mundane problems like a spider bit your foot. Now your boot doesn't fit. Yeah, exactly. I would just want to know your boot doesn't fit. And so therefore you are now slowed down. Now, if you don't have a horse, you're walking. Now the pace is slowed because you move at the pace of the slowest person. So if someone's boot doesn't fit and they're kind of hobbled, either you have to fix it. You can zoom in and we'll role play it out, see if you can fix it. Or you zoom out and you say, you kind of have that choice. Hey, gang, got bitten by a spider. Now your left foot doesn't fit in the boot, so you're kind of hobbled. It's slowing you guys down in half. Do you have something to deal with that spider, or are you just going to wait it out? And if you're going to wait it out, then okay, you're slowed by half. Or oh my gosh, oh no, we have the cart, so we'll dump one of our barrels of water and we'll put the guy in the cart instead. Okay, fine. So you could reduce your rations and you make that exchange, and you can keep going at your current pace. Or I want to use one of my spells, or I want to use my, I don't know, my healing skills to suck the poison out, whatever it is, right? You make that choice and then you can, adjust from there. But yes, I totally agree. Nothing. Evil Table said, yeah, good points. As written, these are more just vague inspirations for DM improv and rulings. But yeah, it would be nice to write these out more each with specific descriptions for each one. I think the main thing I would want to put is maybe what these mean. And because remember, this is all for hex crawling. So I think the biggest thing I would want is affecting the movement rates, because that's what we're tracking. So it wouldn't take much to add a little bit. You even think just in terms of the blog, you've got room. You could spread these out a little bit more and say, okay, heavy wind and fog, half travel speed. Retainer exhausted. You could say, hey, you got to stop. Rock slide, mudslide, maybe some ideas of what the choice is. You can still leave it pretty vague. Just give me as a GM some idea of what the choice was supposed to communicate to the players is. Okay, there's a rock slide or mudslide. You can either try to clear it, or is that one you're saying, look, you're just gonna have to go around it. It's too extreme. So we're saying that's just gonna slow you down. Monster traps is kind of interesting. I might just even say that, hey, just a random encounter instead of that, because I don't know I'm not sure. Because what I would have to do with a monster trap is I would have to roll up the random encounter and then think about what kind of trap might be put there. So that one I might want to tweak just in terms of kind of what do I mean, or maybe be more specific. I don't know. That one's an interesting one. It is very inspirational, but in the moment, it's going to leave me with a lot of questions that I'll have to figure out. Then we get to locations. Oh, Terrence, there's a snake in my boot. Intensifies. Yep. Hello, Woody. Yeah, no, I got a lot of love for the Toy Story movies. Locations. We get a nearby hidden location. Could be a dungeon, a structure, something natural, ruins, monument, or a resource. What would natural mean? I might like a subtable of roll on the natural table. Are we talking about things like waterfalls? Because we have some of that stuff's already in the hazard. Because I would think if it's a natural structure or natural location, it might be some of these would work. So cliff would strike me as an interesting natural location. Certainly a deep chasm would interest me as a natural location. A steep elevation, I'm guessing that's kind of the opposite of a cliff. I'm thinking a steep elevation and cliff. I guess steep elevation you can climb. It's not completely vertical, and a cliff is vertical. Some of these would count as natural, so I might want to rethink what natural means in terms of locations. And some of this is just for me. When I'm on GM and I'm reading these, I just kind of want to know. To me, I always want to know, what does the creator envision with this? Even if I might in the game, I'm going to riff off. I'm going to do what I want. Oh, structure. Maybe even though I rolled structure on this location table, I'm still going to pick dungeon. Even though I think structure in this case is more of a building. And maybe building's better than structure. I don't know, but a building, a tower, a castle, something. It's not a ruin because I didn't go ruins, but I might make it a ruined castle because that's what I want. But I kind of like to know, well, the creator, what are they envisioning? Like, how have they balanced it? If they've tested this, kind of what kind of things are they coming up with? So knowing sort of what natural means and that sort of is helpful, even if I'm not going to, use it. Oh, Terrence had to go with don't go chasing waterfalls. Yep. Don't do that. Yep. looks like we got a spammy message in there. Oh, not Terrence. Oh, stop. No. This person. Oh, I already must have blocked it already. Okay, so we got some. There we go. All right, good. Hopefully I didn't block the wrong person. Just got a spammy message in there. So it seems like spam messages can get through, but it had kind of a pseudo URL, but not a properly formed one. Maybe that's why it snuck through. But I saw it. Okay, and then we have Spore, sign of a nearby monster, rolled from the wandering monster table. It could be tracks, sound, smell, a corpse, food remains, or excrement. Yeah, so definitely when I see these Spore, which is kind of what I thought for Spore, it's when you're resting, I wonder about that. I wonder if there's something else that could be here, because if you're at camp, meaning you're in the same spot, what would be the reasoning for finding tracks? I mean, is the assumption that you're scouting more, so you happen to find stuff that you wouldn't have found if you come through, or is it that this stuff is kind of popping up near you? Because as a player, I might be a little bit weirded out if we're resting and then it's like, oh, you see a corpse. I'm like, well, because I think my first thought as a character would be, or as a player would be, we wouldn't have camped right near a corpse. Like we're not trying to camp in the kill site of the local wolves. So why didn't we see this before? And that's where I would find with that, right? Okay, you decide to camp. This is what happens. I'm like, I don't think I would have camped near food remains or a corpse or probably excrement, because usually, at least everything I've played, you're usually trying to find that let's camp away from where we think things are going to come. So maybe I wouldn't. But I kind of get the idea that if it's something like, if we knew it was sound, I definitely think you'd have more chance of hearing things because you're hanging around. But I just want to know a little bit more about how we're interacting with spores in that camping segment. Yeah, Bob Mostel says spam messages 1 on 1d6. Yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. Brian asks, is there a way to share a Google Doc link? I think, well, I mean, you could share it, but then it just, wherever you share it, everyone's going to have a link. So maybe the best way, Mr. Smith, is if you want to send it to me, you can probably DM me. I don't know if you follow me on Twitter. I don't know if your Twitter is Brian Smith or something else. You could figure out to get to me there. In which case, if you just add it at me, right, anyone can kind of look it up. But if you DM it to me, then it should be safe and I should only get it. And then I can kind of download it or pull it up and not share it necessarily if you're not ready for it to be shared. Brian Smith says, you lay down on a bedroll, your bedroll on a corpse. Yeah. Well, hey, Brian Smith, don't get on the Twitters just to send me something. You could probably, I don't know. See, this is the thing with YouTube. I like the community features on YouTube. I'm not saying they should take them away, but they're kind of half-baked in a lot of ways. You can only share images. There's no way of sharing files. You have to use a kind of alternative thing there. I don't think there's any way to send somebody some kind of DM message on YouTube. So, because I'd love to say, okay, you're already on YouTube, so send it to me over on YouTube. But if you do that, then I can try to grab it quickly and then delete it, but it just, there's not a good method, unfortunately. Oh, this is like I like this, Terrence. You're kind of going Sunset Boulevard game. You see a corpse, it's yours. You died, challenge, solve the murder. That's pretty much Sunset Boulevard in a nutshell. Start with the body and the voiceover of the person saying, yeah, I died. Let's go back and see how it happened. Oops. Skipped Evil Table. Evil Table says that makes sense. Helps a lot for thinking about how to expand it further, include more subtables. Hey, Evil Table, I really appreciate you sending to me. I think there's a lot of good stuff here, and I could totally use this as is. I mean, these are just my thoughts. A lot of it's really going to come down to who your audience is, what your end goal for this is. If you're doing it just to share, I think this is perfectly fine. If it's something, in that kind of inspirational vein, right? Hey, people get this and they'll take it and they'll use it for what they want. If there's something that you want to flesh out and you want to turn it into something more of a, product, then these are some things that I would look for on that level. But I don't mean to suggest that this is not perfectly usable as is. It's just a matter of what your use case is and what you want to leave to the end user, so to speak, of this mechanic versus what you want to build in. Like I said, and other people may be different. I always just like to see what the intention is. So things like if this mudslide or if you got a cut or an injury, what does it mean? Is it supposed to be a major injury? Is it an injury you're going to need to rest the next day, right? That might be my thing. Hey, someone got injured. You fell, you threw out your back. So you got to rest a full day, and then maybe you could make a save versus death every day to see if you're like, that's an injury to me. And that has an immediate thing of what I understand about what it means in terms of the hex crawl. Like, okay, now if this comes up, you're stuck for potentially multiple days as you're trying to rest because you got to rest to get over the injury. That gives me a much better idea of, even if I don't want to use that, but I want to use maybe I want to use the mechanical part of the result and not the fictional part. The fictional part being injury, the mechanical part being you're stuck and now someone's gonna have to make a save, or you're stuck until somebody makes a save to get over their injury. Then that gives me a little bit more to work with in terms of if I want to freelance it. And plus I kind of get the idea of, okay, this is the kind of injury they mean, as opposed to, well, I don't really know what they mean and how does this affect things anyway? And are the players just going to look at me and say, well, it's just a cut. I just put a Band-Aid on and keep walking. And then it's like, okay. And then it really does, and then in terms of the zoomed out level, the hex crawl doesn't really mean anything. It was just like, hey, you got a cut. Okay, I bandaged it. You keep walking. All right. As opposed to something that's more, meaningful. But that's me. Just me. And then nothing says, in the DM's defense, the players didn't specify that they checked for a corpse before putting down their bedroll. Absolutely. And look, they could have been 6 feet down. Maybe it was slowly working its way up. Sort of like Uma Thurman in Kill Bill Part 2. She was down there and she was just clawing her way up, and you just happen to have your bedroll on top of there. Brian Smith says, send it over the Twitters. I had an account from long ago, never used. Okay, cool. And Bob Mazel says, it's a cut. Rub some dirt on it. Absolutely. All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Anything else? Did I pin a message I didn't mean to pin? No, I didn't want to pin that. Get that out of there. Anything else before I call it a stream? I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow. I'd like to stream tomorrow. I just don't know. Got to drive down to Philly, see what's going on, get my room set. Maybe it'll be kind of an evening stream. I'm going to be by myself, so I don't know. I have no idea. This is my first convention, definitely my first PAX Unplugged. I have no idea what my schedule is going to be. I'm going to try people either to do something streaming or record something, audio, video, both kind of thing. I'm sure I'll have some time where I just don't know what I'm doing, or I'm in the room or whatnot, where I could probably do it, but it probably won't be, 1 p.m. I'm guessing. Okay. Oh, wait, whoops. There we go. Message requests. I'll accept it. All right. Hey, Brian Smith, before I let you go, Bob Mazel says, have fun in Philly, don't catch anything. Yeah, I'll try not to catch anything. I do have my shots and I got my booster earlier this week, so hopefully I will be, I'll be as safe as I can be, and I'll be all masked up and all that. So hopefully it will work out fine. Hey, Brian Smith, let me know do you want me, can I do it on the stream? Maybe as part of the next roundup, or maybe if I get a couple of other things. And I guess I should say, just for everybody, if you have something you'd like to do, kind of a show and tell, it would be cool if I had enough. Darren says, Uma Thurman underground attack, TPK incoming. Yeah, you can't stop her. You can only hope to contain her. I'd love to get sort of periodical show and tells from folks here in the community. So if you got stuff that you don't mind sharing, because obviously it will be on screen and we'll read through it and have comments and stuff. Yeah, shoot it over, because I would love to do it. Maybe I'll try to come up with a mailbox that I can easily say, hey, send it here. I don't have one, so I won't share one. But, Hex Pressman on Twitter, probably the best way at the moment. If you find me on Discord, I don't know what my Discord encoded name is, but I'm there. Or you can, if it's something that's already out like this in a blog post, you can throw it in the community. YouTube section and just reply to something that's already there. I don't know if anybody can just make a community post, but if you can't, throw it in there as a comment or, something like Twitter if you're on Twitter. But this was awesome. Thanks everybody for hanging out. On your way out, if you could give a thumbs up, that would be awesome. And if you were lurking in here and you're not subscribed and you liked this, then go ahead and subscribe. It doesn't hurt you, helps me out a bit with the algorithms and whatnot, and you'll just get notified if anything's going on. Thanks for the well wishes for the con. I'm super looking forward to it. No idea how it's going to go. Hopefully I'll be able to get some people, corner them, and get their thoughts on stuff. I really haven't even had a chance to look at who's going to be there, but I think there's going to be a lot of folks there. So, even if I do none of that, I'll get to play some games, play some role-playing games, play some board games, and then I'll probably do a couple of videos talking about that stuff. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you're watching or listening to this. Game on.